guys, we're going to be beginning our defensive curriculum, and what we're going to do is we're going to start in a strange order. Rather than going from, let's say, the guard position and moving into positions where my opponent gradually becomes more dominant, what we're going to do is we're going to start in reverse. So we're going to start answering some of the harder questions as far as when I get stuck in a really bad position and how to extricate myself from them. So the first place we're going to start is the mount position, okay? Rather than going to the back, which would be the worst in the series, what we're going to do is we're going to start off with the understanding that whenever I am in a fight, whether standing or on the ground, I never give my back to my opponent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to concentrate on, should the fight end up on the ground, my back remains against the floor, and then whatever subsequent dominant position that my opponent takes, we're going to answer with movements how to escape from them and better our position. And our first stop is going to be the most dominant position that my opponent could possibly attain with my back on the floor, which is the mounted position. Things we need to understand about the mount is what is going to dictate my escape from that position will be the posture that my opponent chooses to take over me. So with that, so the first thing I need to keep track of here when I'm mounted is what my opponent's posture is like, okay? If my opponent is postured up, that typically means a strike is gonna come my way, okay? So what I don't wanna do is make the mistake of sticking my hands out to block punches, okay? If he starts punching here, I may be able to block a couple of strikes, but eventually he's gonna get a strike in, okay? What's even worse is that by removing my elbows from this lowered position here, he's gonna be able to ride up high into the mount, and now it takes away one of the few useful things I actually have to escape this position, which is my hips, okay? So the first thing I want to do is I want to get my elbows down and my triceps pressed against the ground. I would also like to have at least one of my elbows to be inside of his knee. It's called the inside position, okay? Now when I see him try to rear up for a strike, I'm going to bring my feet up and bridge my hips, making him place his hands on the ground. Okay. Now I use that same bridge to turn on my side, and now I place both of my hands on his knee, and I begin to shrimp away from him, extracting always my bottom leg. Okay. Now I turn to the other side, and I complete the same movement, pushing on his leg, shrimping away, and now closing a guard around him. And ideally I would like to break him down and hold his posture here so he doesn't have an opportunity to strike again. Okay. Our second escape position is going to be when my opponent takes a different posture with a different intention. So now, let's say I'm here, and my opponent, who's mounted on top of me, is actually trying to crush me with his weight. Okay? Now, his interest isn't so much in striking me as it is to control me, right? So now it would be very difficult for me to do a leg escape. Even if I bridged, I wouldn't be able to turn my shoulders over, okay? But what's nice about this is that now, since he's chest to chest, we're essentially one mass. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm going to keep my elbows down, keep my inside position, and keep him placed over my hips. Now, I'm gonna pick a side of his body to isolate. So let's say I wanna go this way towards you, okay? What I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna wrap his arm, okay? I like this method here. This is also acceptable, okay? But this method here is much quicker, and it's going to steer you away from problems later on, okay? So I like to grab here on the bicep and bring my elbow in. Second, I like to keep my legs in a flattened position. I don't like to start here because more advanced jiu-jitsu players will grapevine their legs and put more weight on my hips, which will be more uncomfortable. So I like to start in this position, and then once I'm ready to do my escape, I trap here, quickly raise both my heels to my butt, and now on the same side that I'm isolating, I take my foot and I step out to capture his leg. Now he has no limbs to stop my bridge. So now from here, I'm going to keep this hand pressed firmly to his hip. I'm going to bridge onto my head and shoulder, rolling him over, And now immediately I'm placing both of my hands on his abdomen and getting posture inside his guard. Okay? One thing I want to avoid doing is bridging my opponent by using my hand in this position. Okay? This works great to get him over. So I bridge and I kind of like punch towards the ceiling. It works great for the bridge, but once I get here, he's gonna be able to wrap my arm, and if he's good with his jiu-jitsu and his guard game, now he's gonna be able to start attacking my arm. So I wanna make the habit of when I do an upa, of keeping my hand placed firmly in his hip, so that when I arrive here, it's actually the first hand that helps me get posture. Our last escape here is going to be when my opponent splits the difference between his two postures. This is something that more experienced grapplers tend to do. Okay? So once I'm here, someone who's got more of a punching or street fight mentality is going to be thinking about posturing up to hit. Okay? That makes his position relatively unstable once I start moving my hips. Okay? Someone who's more wrestling or grappling based will want to squash their weight down on me to make it difficult for me to move and maximize their control over me, okay? Now, something you'll run into with experienced grapplers is they'll split the difference between the two, and they'll keep their hands on the floor and kind of hang out in the middle between the two positions, okay? So if I tried to, let's say, raise my hips up and do a leg escape, when my hips come up and I try to turn, he'll squash his weight down on top of me, so I can't turn my shoulders, okay? Now, if suddenly I wanted to switch to the upa and I went to wrap his arm, he postures up and pulls his arm out, and I don't have my upa anymore, okay? So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna create a frame with my arms that takes away his body weight, okay? So I'm going to always, again, keeping my elbows low, and this is where the inside position becomes important. I bring one elbow to the inside position. Now, I bring my other forearm across here. Notice I don't grab my hands because there's too much flex there, okay? What I'm doing is I'm lining up this forearm with this forearm. And now, if Josh presses his weight on top of me, I can carry that weight a little bit. It doesn't have to be a great deal, just enough so that regardless of where his posture is, I can turn one hip slightly up. So let's say I turn this way. All I want to do is I want to create my frame and now just kind of slightly turn my hip as much as I can. Now both of my legs are kind of facing in this direction, okay? The leg that's on this side is going to remain flat on the ground. Now my leg from the other side is going to come over, and I'm trying to clip Josh's instep with my heel, okay? If you notice, even though Josh puts his leg flat on the floor, because of the way his instep is shaped, there's always a curvature here that my heel can hook into, okay? Another way to do this is with your toes, here, okay? But my personal preference, especially when you're beginning with the movement, is here. Now, I'm gonna cross my feet to bring his leg on top of my thigh. Now I have this. Notice that when I do that, it begins to raise his knee off the ground. Now I wanna scoop my hip up under his knee and push his leg in between my legs. Now that leaves me in a perfect position to do a shrimp or a leg escape on this side, wrap my guard, and close. Okay? And that's our third escape, called the frame escape.